Hey folks, David Stewart here. Don't forget to buy something from Amazon. That's a great book right there, Keys to Prolific Creativity. It will help you with your creative process, whether you are a musician or an artist or a writer, since I am a writer and a musician. But today I'm going to be talking about music. The Grammys just happened, and everybody was talking about some ugly woman dressing in a way that would make a whore bashful rather than music. And that's good because the music sucks. So my question that I'm going to answer today and qualify in lots of different ways is, does today's music suck? Has music gotten worse? And the question that then arises, if that's true, when did it start to get bad? So this is partly prompted by, I saw a Rick Beato video where he's like, this is proof that music has gotten worse. I'm going to dig into the weeds here and talk about that. Has music gotten worse? Or first of all, is music bad? Yes, and also no. Those things can actually coexist quite happily now because of the way that our culture is arranged and the way that we consume media. Has it gotten worse? The answer is yes, in a couple of different ways. I recorded a video on this 10 years ago, and I thought popular music back then was bad, and it's gotten markedly worse over the last 10 years. I thought it was terrible 10 years ago, and I thought it had been terrible for like 20 years at that point. That's the last question. When did it start to get bad? The answer is 1997. 1997 is when popular music started to go right down the toilet, and it hasn't gotten better since then. And there are some very specific reasons as to why that happened that I'll expand on. So can music also be good? Yeah, there's actually been a ton of great music released over the last 30 years. But when we're talking about popular music, the music that is like the pop music, the music that wins the Grammy Awards, no, it sucks. It sucked for a long time, and it's definitely gotten worse. So I'm with Rick as far as that is concerned, but I do want to bring some of my points back from that previous video and just reiterate those before I dig into the weeds, because I've discovered some things over the last 10 years about the history of pop music and evaluating and just reviewing records and looking at pop culture history. I've discovered some newer things since then about how the culture has degraded. So the reason that music sucks and is also really good has to do with our culture and what's happened, which is that popular culture is not what it used to be. It used to be that everybody listened to the same music. In the 1980s, we all heard the same thing. So if you go and you watch that Rick Beato video, he has a clip from like the 1984 Grammys, and you see that like Michael Jackson is nominated for Best Song twice. And there's a bunch of great songs that you probably would know right off the top of your head, including Beat It. So everybody was like listening to the same stuff in the 1980s. Like my grandma knew who Michael Jackson was, right? That's how big Michael Jackson is. Now, though, you don't need to, right? You have the internet, and I was ecstatic about the internet in the early 2000s because it allowed me to find out about so many bands that didn't suck and listen to so much more music that was good, that wasn't bad. Because music started to get really bad. Like I said, in 1997, I found the radio just unlistenable starting basically 97 and 98. Once Clear Channel Communications bought up all of the radio stations here in the United States, radio got really, really bad. Pop music got really, really bad. So the internet was the salvation. But while it was the salvation, it was also kind of our doom because it allowed people like me to just stop consuming any kind of popular culture music, and the record companies then no longer had to capture as many people. If you look at a record from 1984 like Thriller, which has a song like Beat It. Beat It has Eddie Van Halen and Steve Lukather on it, major rock guitar players. These guys are absolutely killer musicians and were great at playing rock and playing hard rock and heavy metal. And so you had this song, this straight ahead rocking song on a pop album, and it was really good, and it was really well done, and it was a kind of song that anyone could listen to and enjoy, but especially rock fans. You don't really get that. you don't get the variety of Thriller on any kind of modern pop record. What you have is something that's dialed in to be very lowest common denominator, while maintaining kind of a club music style is what you tend to get these days. You're not going to get a straight ahead rock song because you don't have to capture listeners like me anymore, right? We're off doing our own thing. We're off listening to Winter Sun and Immortal or whatever on our own and just not interacting with popular music at all. And it just kind of creates a feedback loop where they're not producing any music for you, so you become more disengaged, which makes them less likely to produce any music for you. Whereas in the 1980s, you just had a lot more variety on every record. If you just pick any kind of top record, it could be Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits. There's so much variety on that album, or Thriller by Michael Jackson, or some of the Yes albums from the 80s, like 90125. These albums had so much variety on them compared to modern music, because if you were a really good producer, you would encourage the artists to kind of, put some different kinds of tracks in it. You need like a ballad. Even if you're doing a straight ahead metal album, there'd be a ballad on it. There'd be, every Metallica album had that track 4, that kind of change up song. And Metallica was like really on the heavy side of metal in the 80s, and they were still doing it. So you just had more variety in music in each individual record back then. You were capturing a bigger audience. You were casting a wider net. Now that net doesn't have to be as wide, but as wide as you're going to make it, it has to really be dumbed down. It has to be for the lowest common denominator. And so that's a big reason why that's changed. Now, I want to bring in an idea that I've talked about multiple times in the past, which is we forget the bad stuff. And so when we're comparing today's music, we are going to be comparing it primarily to the songs from the past that have been filtered. That is, they've been passed down to us because they're good. The bad stuff gets forgotten, the good stuff gets remembered. And so what tends to happen is we're comparing everything from today that we don't like to the best selections of the past. This is the mistake a lot of people make when they're like trying to compare music to Mozart, for instance. Yeah, you're comparing something that's been filtered by hundreds of years of time to be of high quality and to be to have a universal appreciation and artistic appeal to something that's been out for a couple of weeks. The question is anybody going to be listening to, like, I don't know, Billie Eilish or whatever 100 years from now? I don't think so. I don't think anyone's going to listen to it. Just like how I don't think anyone listens to, like, Stephen Foster, Camptown Races. Right? There's all kinds of pop music from the past that just gets forgotten. The music of the folk tends to kind of get churned through with popular media. So I do want to bring that up, that we are, in a lot of cases, making poor comparisons. We're comparing our favorite things from the past to the best, or to the worst things of today. And of course, things are going to appear worse now than they used to in the past. If you go back to 1994, not everything was Soundgarden and Nirvana or whatever. There was like plenty of garbage that was on the radio in 1994. So I think a better one is to, like, what's the worst songs of 1994, and are they better than the best songs today? And I actually think they are a little bit better. So I do want to get that out of the way, that like 90% of everything is crap, and we tend to forget the bad stuff. So it makes things appear worse than they are. We tend to forget about the music that's not popular, that is more niche, which is better. It's just going to be better and better made. So there's still great music being made today, absolutely, but you're not going to hear it at the Grammy Awards. It's just not going to be there. The Grammy Awards are about titillating people, and apparently celebrities patting themselves on the back while they show their body parts, whatever it's going to be, the newest edgy thing. That's all the edge that they have left, because they can't push the boundaries of music. It's the same crap we've heard for 20 years. The music hasn't really moved on past that critical point that I have not named it, but others in my circle have named it cultural ground zero, which is 1997. So what happened to music in 1997? We could talk about a number of things, but the biggest one was the condensation of the radio ship ownership under one company. That's Clear Channel Communications. It's now called iHeartRadio. This is a result of the Telecommunications Act from 1996, signed by Bill Clinton, that deregulated the radio industry. The thing is, whenever you hear about deregulation, if you scratch a little bit deeper, you're like, oh, it only like deregulated one part, and it's actually still highly regulated. So what happened is they allowed people to own as many radio stations as they wanted. So very quickly within a year, you had a conglomeration that bought up pretty much all the FM radio stations in the United States, ended up owning a majority of them. And I remember I lived in Fresno at the time, and all of the radio stations except for one were owned by Clear Channel Communications. So the entire market was owned by one company. They had an effective monopoly. There was one independent radio station that played like popular music, but I think it went out of business. So I think you ended up with just nothing but Clear Channel stations for a long time. And so with that monopoly, it's like, why didn't people open up more radio stations? Well, you couldn't legally because the FCC controls whether you can have a broadcasting license, and they tend to dish out those broadcasting licenses based on what the content of the radio station is going to be. So it's sort of a protected racket. It's like if you were the adult contemporary station in town, people weren't going to be able to open they weren't going to get a license to open another adult contemporary station. So the result of that is monopoly. And so once you have that monopoly, then you end up with this relationship where record companies really only have to deal with one company. That company might have equity in those record companies. So there's a payola layer there it's like legal payola because they're not actually paying the radio stations. Rather, they own equity in one, and so it's like a stock valuation and those sorts of things. So everything got leveled out. You would have the same songs being heard on every radio station across the country. That reduced the variety of numbers of artists that was possible. It just squished it into the ground. And in my opinion, it also began to produce the quality, because when you're looking at, we need to make 5 songs that need to appeal to everybody, rather than this station is picking lots of songs that might appeal to their local demographic, and this radio station is picking different songs. You have to do 5 songs that have to appeal to everybody. Then you're going to dumb them down. So the more people you appeal to, the stupider things have to be, the dumber they have to be. It's just the law of life, because you have to get the 80 IQ guy and you got to get the 110 IQ guy, and they both have to understand what the music is doing. This is why if you were to just have a radio station play nothing but Bach, what's the IQ? You're going to miss all the 80 IQ guys. They're just not going to get it, right? So you have to write dumbed down pop music with 2 chords. Now, I do remember a student coming in he's like, I want to learn this Maroon 5 song. This was years ago. And I was like, listen to it. I was like, there's 2 chords, and here's the 2 chords. And you can learn those 2 chords, and that's the song. It's 2 chords, the same chords. And the only thing that changed from the verse and the chorus was like the instrumentation changed and there was a different vocal line. Same 2 chords. Really, really funny. Anyway, so yes, I do think music has gotten worse in those ways, popular music. And as we've splintered off into our own little silos, people using the word silo, we're siloed, then the popular music has to get even stupider and even worse in order to appeal to as many people as it can, because there's fewer and fewer people that are actually interested in pop music as time goes on. And you have to have things that are even, more and more and more edgy, because no one's paying attention to the music, or I don't feel like it is. I don't meet any real people in real life that listen to pop music. They're not aware of Chappelle Roan. I think that was the one who's shut up topless or with like the nipple things. I don't know. They don't know who Billie Eilish is. And I'm talking to young people. They're like, who? Oh yeah, I guess I've heard her songs. I don't know. Right? Like no one listens to pop music. Whereas in the 80s, if I were to talk to a 30-year-old, they knew who Michael Jackson was. If I was to talk to an 80-year-old, they would probably know who Michael Jackson was. Yeah, like I said, my grandma knew who Michael Jackson was. Like, holy crap, she was in her 60s and she knew who Michael Jackson was. Everyone knew who it was. So the monolithic pop culture, that has disintegrated because of the internet. And I feel like most people are not really talking about that thing that has caused our culture to splinter off. But at the same time, it saved a lot of music, right? We're able to have a lot of high quality music because of the internet. There's other little things. And so the things that I think have an impact but are less important than those big meta things, the breakdown of the culture, the having to dumb things down in order to appeal to the highest possible number of people. It has to be Cat in the Hat, right? If you want the maximum number of people to be capable of reading it, you have to write Cat in the Hat. You can't write Lonesome Dove or whatever thing you think is complicated to write. It can't be Ulysses. Okay, it has to be Cat in the Hat. So other things. Pro Tools, right? Or just any DAW. DAWs have made music very sterile and have reduced the musicianship quality necessary to produce music. I mentioned this in some other videos. So pop artists today are of a lower talent level than they were in the past. Because they don't have to be, right? You can manufacture like a perfectly mixed song with a competent producer, and you really don't have to have the talent there. And that actually started in the late 90s as well. You had acts like Britney Spears. Britney Spears can't really sing. She was just a face that you stuck onto some music, and you did it that way, you know, or Backstreet Boys or things like that. Not that they can't sing, but the talent level of Backstreet Boys might be higher than modern artists, but compared to, you know, the auteur guys in the alternative music scene like Chris Cornell in the 90s, there's not really like much of a comparison. The talent level is just lower. It's a manufactured product. It's a corporate product first and foremost, rather than a corporation investing in a product. So yeah, the corporations don't really have to invest in anything to capture my attention, because, you know, guys can make records in their garage that blow anything they would do out of the water, right? It's so possible to make a record on your own now because of Pro Tools, but that also lowers the quality of pop music. While it lets great artists have the ability to record things on a very limited budget and have them sound great, it also makes it so pop artists are of an even lower quality than they were before. But that's a less of an effect, I think, than those meta things that I talked about. But anyway, I would love to have your thoughts on this, whether you think music has gotten worse and in what ways. Because like I said, it's gotten worse in some ways, it hasn't gotten worse in others. And a lot of times we're making really bad comparisons between the music of now and the music of the past. We're comparing Wagner to Billie Eilish. That's a terrible comparison. Most people alive back 130 years ago never really heard Wagner. A better comparison would be Wagner to, or not Wagner, Billie Eilish. Is that how you say her name? Correct me if I'm wrong. Compare her to Stephen Foster. And that's a better comparison. And tell me if you like Camptown Races more than Billie Eilish songs. I do, but I wouldn't say Camptown Races is like better. And that's the last part that I'll question you guys with. Whenever we're talking about better or worse, these are qualities. They're not quantities. I can't measure better. I can qualify better. And I can use a lot of different ways to try to round it off and qualify it and make it not so my experience is this and it's something outside of myself, but it's still a quality. And so defining better or worse becomes really, you really start to get into the bogs, you get into the swamp, you're trudging through the mud trying to figure out what makes a thing better or worse. Like, is it complexity? Is it not complexity? I think music's gotten maybe slightly rhythmically more complex compared to 30 years ago, but harmonically much simpler. So maybe that evens out. I feel like a lot of the music of the 90s was very simple too, but was it better? How do you decide whether it's better or not? Is it catchier? To me, I think the reduction in complexity is probably the best thing I can point to, is that it's dumbed down. It's less complex than it used to be. It's 2 chords instead of 4 chords. It's instead of a verse, chorus, bridge, intro kind of song, you have just straight into section 1, section 2, and that's the entire song, or maybe just one section of music. So it's formally less complex than it used to be as well. Anyway, I would love to know how you qualify better or worse, and if you think this is a real thing. Rick Beato seems to think so, and he's a very knowledgeable guy. And, I would weight his opinion and consider it, but I would also, I'd also say, hey, wait a minute. I think we forget about a lot of the bad stuff from the past too that just sounded like crap. I hear all kinds of songs from the 60s sometimes and I'm like, wow, this is not good. So anyway, leave me your thoughts down below and I'd love to read them. Or is it just a matter of age, right? Because that's another thing from the older videos, that if you ask somebody, when did music start to suck? They will say the year that they turned like 19 or 20 is when music started to suck. Well, I was 14 in 1997, so I'm younger than that. And I didn't really like a lot of the music of the early 90s. So I kind of break that mold. But that's a really common thing, is people are very attached to the music when they were teenagers, less so than when they're adults. But because Rick has been in the industry, he probably has a little bit better perspective of it. And he's older than me. So he really likes Nirvana and he's older than me. So that means that there's probably more to that than just he stopped liking music when he turned 20. But that happens with a lot of people too, especially like baby boomers and things like that. Well, music started to suck in 1972. Well, that's because you were born in 1953, right? That's why it started to suck then. But anyway, I would love to read your thoughts. I've gone on with this little video long enough. I've given you my reasons. Give me your reasons, and I'll read them down below. Take it easy, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. You can find my books on Amazon. Just search me up on Amazon and check out my music channel down below and get some live, really human, improvised music. No AI. No AI. Have a great one.